You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Hey everybody, it's Andy Polk back in studio with Jasmine Pendergrass. Hey, Jasmine.
Hello.
How are you?
Great.
Things are going well?
Awesome, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm going to try to switch it up today.
Oh, trying to be happy?
Yeah.
Sounds like you bought some new shoes.
Hopefully they come to my doorstep.
There you go. Let's hope so. Let's hope they're not stolen off your doorstep.
No, I'll
the
cry.
joy.
The weather's breaking, so I have some shoes coming in.
Still my sunshine. Love that song. LEN, I believe it was, from the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Check it out.
You'll have to hit me to that.
I'll get you a playlist.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Right. I'm here for it.
All right.
Yeah.
Folks, there were just so many good tidbits that we got at our Footwear Executive Summit that we held in Washington, D.C. That we have made many episodes out of the summit. And this is one such episode that we're pulling. It's actually a panel that I ran on technology. Our industry obviously is changing in many, many different ways, Jasmine. I feel like every single day there's something new that's happening. And so rather than focus on one individual segment, we kind of had 4 different segments. Yep. So we had Sketchfab, we had VI3, we had One Huddle, and then we had Impactiva. Yep. And so all of those companies all focus on different segments of our industry and bringing technology. So you're talking about design and development in 3D. You're talking about IP protection, using technology to better track product around the world, make sure your knockoffs aren't occurring, or if your product is being shipped to the right location, it's not being transshipped or reshipped somewhere else. You're talking about workforce development in the 21st century using gamification, which is really cool.
Very cool.
And then with Impactiva, of course, they're great partners of ours, and they focus a lot on productivity issues in factories and using technology, in this case, human technology, to improve those processes. So the panel, it's a little bit long, but it's really insightful about how all these folks and these companies approach different issues facing our industry. So as you listen, hopefully it'll give you some insights into how things are changing, how you could utilize some of these companies and their services to help bolster different areas of your business. But with that, let's get straight to it. Blake, go ahead and run the clip.
Had some great conversations at lunch today about changing workforce issues, changing product, changing leaderships, all these different things that are happening in our industry. And one of those things that we always talk about in our office is how important product is, and how important it is for our industry to do what they do really well, and how important partnerships are with kind of experts. So as we think about technology, obviously some companies are really large and can develop technologies from within, but many of us rely on partnerships of companies to help us navigate change and bring their expertise to the table for us. And so this is a great panel. This is a hand-picked panel. One of the benefits of working at FDRA is we get to peer behind the curtain of a lot of different companies and talk to their innovation directors, talk to their developers and designers on what they're working on, what their challenges are, who they're partnering with. With this panel, I'm going to start, we're going to go right down the middle. So Alban, we'll start with you, my friend. So Sketchfab, right off the bat. Sketchfab is something that I use. It's on my phone. I think if you leave today without downloading Sketchfab as an app and starting to play with that, I think you're losing out. I think as we look at these technologies and transformations, if you're not playing around with the technology, you're not understanding it, and you're not seeing what's coming down the pike. So I'm a big believer in Sketchfab. So maybe you can just explain really quickly what Sketchfab is and how some footwear companies are using it.
Sure. So Sketchfab is a platform to publish, share, and embed interactive 3D content on the web. We created the first web-based 3D player on the internet back in 2012. And today we are the largest library of 3D files on the internet. And so we work with a lot of shoe companies using us to easily deploy and integrate interactive 3D content on e-commerce, social media, for product configurators, advertising, and new platforms like VR and AR.
Great. So the idea is you can take a 3D model, you can put it into Sketchfab, and let's say you're doing sampling. Instead of flying 50 people in from all over the world to do a sampling process, you can put this into Sketchfab and people can actually drop the shoe in augmented reality on the floor anywhere they are, and you can have conversations about that by using Sketchfab, right? That's one of the ideas?
Yeah, so the initial idea is that when you create a 3D file, and you can do that with a CAD software or with 3D capture, if you want to show this file to someone, you usually need a proprietary 3D program to open the file. And so we wanted to fix that thanks to the web, just like YouTube fixed that for the video world. And so we just made an upload platform. You upload your 3D file, you get back a URL, and then you can share it internally for the product development process. But then the fact that it's hosted on the web means you can embed it anywhere where you want to be. And then with the new ways to consume content like VR and AR, we added VR and AR support to the platform, making it super easy for anyone to publish to this platform without needing any programming skills.
Right. So I've actually used Sketchfab on virtual reality where you can pull up a shoe in that virtual world, zoom in and out, and get, really detailed look at the shoe as you look at it, which is really important for processes on our development process as we try to speed up, we try to digitalize and things like that. But you guys also have, it was showing on there, let's dive a little bit into the e-commerce, because you can embed these things into your social media platforms or on your websites and people can actually engage and interact. So I follow you on LinkedIn and I've seen like Legos doing this, right? Where you can actually change color, you can flip it around and you don't click through, it's actually in that box. So tell a little bit about what that means for like ROI if people use this for social media, for putting on their website, what kind of conversions and things like, I guess conversions and like lower returns. If they better understand the product, there's a chance that they understand it, they know what they're getting, and there's less returns.
Yeah, so I guess the first goal is to provide a better end user experience, because today when you go to an e-commerce website to buy a product and you see like 12 little thumbnails of 12 angles of a product, it's just insane. Like the product exists in 3D in the real world, and so there is no reason that wouldn't be the case on the web if you can do it. And so with platforms like Sketchfab, now you can do it, which means we're essentially showing you a digital twin of the actual products. It's the closest you can get to the actual product. And you're starting to interact with it within the web page, which means you're already creating a relationship with the product. And in the case of a shoe, it's pretty relevant even before buying it. So that's really super important. And then in terms of conversion, we've seen a conversion improvement of up to 50%. Typically, in like the furniture industry, it's been really helping drive sales, less returns. But I think beyond the ROI aspect of the technology, for me the question is, like 10 years from now, everybody will have AR glasses, they will have the form factor of the glasses I'm wearing today, and other brands will have to have virtual versions of all their products, because this is going to be one of the major ways people shop. And so the question is, what are you doing today to be ready for this wave that is going to take time, but that is happening for sure.
I think you're right. I mean, I think any kind of augmented or virtual reality is going to be the norm in 10 years, and anybody who doesn't think so will probably forget only 10 years ago, Jason Bourne used a flip phone to take down a rogue government agency, and now we can take smartphones and drop shoes on the floors and look at them in real time via Sketchfab. So as you look to the future, as I said before, you really want to play around with these technologies just so you can comprehend what's happening with it. And before I bring in the next panelist, we've talked when we were in New York about how there's like this, your platform is huge and it's global, and people are creating these 3D models and dropping it in, and you can play around with anything and everything. But you said specifically, what caught my attention was, people like Nike have been using this, and it's taken off in ways they didn't anticipate, right? It's like this grassroots well where people start to realize there's these unique like products, these 3D image files that they can use, and they're playing around with it. It's almost, it's taking a life of its own. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how, initially this was just you're kind of proving the thing out, and then all of a sudden it just takes off, and people start using it in ways that you haven't seen before.
Yeah, I guess the platform is used across all industries and companies of all sizes. What's interesting is that there is a combination of user-generated content, and so typically we have a lot of people who scan their own shoes, and so we have a ton of 3D scan, UGC, and then we have official content coming from brands. So it's really interesting to see those two live next to each other. And one thing that's interesting is how some brands use the player for storytelling. We have this feature to add 3D annotations, which are kind of hotspots that you drop wherever you want in the scene. And you can use it to highlight specific features of a product, but you can also use it to tell a story, and almost like a virtual tour within a 3D file, which is pretty cool.
Very cool, very cool. All right, I'm going to bring in Sam from One Huddle. My good friend Sam. We met not too long ago, but we had a couple of beers, and you told me what you did and what your company is that you've created, and I was sold within 3 minutes of you explaining to me what it is. And you focus mainly on workforce training and development. And as soon as you told me how, I think everybody out there uses some form of training. Some of it's pretty archaic and video-based player where you sit someone down and you say, you got to watch the HR video or you got to watch the training thing. And as we look at the workforce today and we look at the millennials, and I had a conversation with Michael Atmore at lunch just about the changing workforce dynamics that we have and how people consume things differently and think differently and want different things. I'm going to bring you in. So One Huddle, tell me a little bit about why you created One Huddle and what it does and some of the companies that you guys are working with.
Yeah, so I sat through, and I'm sure everybody here has sat through their fair share of trainings, and that's time you're never going to get back from those 8, 9 all-day, week-long onboardings. And we started this because we kind of knew a few things. One, we know the workforce is changing today. I'm not going to say the M word because I'm sure you're tired of hearing the word millennial by now, but we know it's 55% of our workforce are millennial or Gen Z by 2020. We know that the jobs they're performing are changing faster than ever. We know that we talk about this thing called a skill gap when we have a lot of workers that are in our stores who have a very large experience gap in face-to-face communication. And I think when you pop the hood, you start to see that we're not going to close these skill gaps today by using tools from the 1980s. And that's printing manuals, that's investing in overproduced learning videos and modules that are not built in a manner for our workers to be able to consume on the go. So we sort of took that concept and said, how do we make training and onboarding and upskilling something that's not just something that's more effective, because we know that close to 90% of what we learn in a live training we forget, but also something that's leveraging something our workforce is already great at today, which are games. Average millennial worker will have spent over 10,000 hours on a game platform before they hit 21. So our concept was, let's help brands take all of their existing stuff, product specs, brand training, onboarding, serious content from harassment, discrimination to bias training, give them a platform where they can convert that into quick burst mobile games. I think what I've realized is that, especially in retail and in a lot of brands today, the person responsible for brand training is often geographically the farthest away from the customer, where the creation of content is so difficult. And using our product, the frontline worker can build training that pushes up through the org, gets deployed as a game, is incentivized, and it's why we'll see nearly 100% voluntary participation across the board with brands that use our platform. I don't think it's simply just because it's a game. I think it's because it's something that empowers workers who today, when they leave your companies, generally raise their hand and say, one of the reasons I quit today is because I didn't feel like I was given everything I needed to be successful at work. So I think that we'll call them on that. If with using One Huddle, you can play games anytime, anywhere, and it could be on everything from your brand to your pricing sheet to your menu to maybe things like leadership development for brands out there that are struggling to develop better middle managers inside of your business.
And I think when we talk about gamification in games, and you throw out the number of 10,000 hours. I mean, that's almost like an expert level, right? You hit 10,000 hours in anything, you're an expert. So they're experts in games, but I saw a statistic the other day that said over 200 million Americans play games. So it's not just, we think of gamers with these video consoles, but it's our phones using Candy Crush. I was on the Metro the other day, and there was a 70-year-old worker that was getting off at the State Department playing some kind of Candy Crush game. I don't even know. But people don't even realize that they know they're playing these games, but it's almost, so it's just prolific in our society now. Where Pokemon Go and all these different things, they don't even realize. I think we forget that this is something that's so adoptive already. So your platform is so simple that somebody can get this and like, oh yeah, absolutely, and they start playing, and then it becomes really catchy, and then you're competing against a coworker, which makes it a lot of fun, and gets those competitive juices going. So what are some brands that you guys work with that have been using this, and how they've been using it? I think you guys work with Fossil and a few others.
Yeah, so this whole thing started for sales training, because I was a sales guy, and I said that I was, again, tired of sitting through the all-day sales training, and it was getting harder and harder. So we built this for salespeople originally. Our first client was right here in DC, was the Washington Capitals. And what they started to see is this type of training we're building does not just for the salesperson, why not for ushers or game day or parking? So we started to expand into different types of training. So today we have clients in about a dozen verticals. So on the retail side, Fossil Retail, we have restaurant brands who every single day spin up a new game based off the menu. So the velocity, I've heard a few speakers talk about speed. Your businesses change rapidly. L&D and training isn't moving fast enough for business today. So with like restaurants and hospitality brands where events and information change rapidly, our product was built with sort of that in mind. And you mentioned, I want to add one thing on the gamification point you made. I think one of the things we tried to tap into, while gamification has become obviously a very big buzzword today, we've tried to hone in on the fact that gamifying something doesn't necessarily make you better at it. So when we launched, we had a tremendous amount of research into what is the benefit of gamifying an activity, and we learned that, while habitually it might make you more likely to do something, if I give you 100 points every time you make a sales call, it doesn't make you better at the sales call. It just motivates you to do it. We wanted to build a product that, as you accrue and earn, it's a reflection on your skill development and your professional development, which might be a credential that matters to the organization.
And you and I talked about where this is kind of headed, and I can envision, obviously, if you think of footwear retail and there's some kind of issue at the store, or there's inventory that stores want to move or highlight, or there's discounts or sales, and you were talking about in real time, the store manager can come in and spin up one of these games. So as employees come in, they play a few of those and it's stuck in their mind. It kind of sticks, right? Versus that kind of video. My dad used to do those videos, used to produce those videos. Yeah. So it kind of sticks in the mind. But we were also talking, as this thing evolves, and you had mentioned it before, but employees can make up their own games, right? And then what that means is, through the platform, it's sending information signals up to headquarters as to what challenges are, what the workers are thinking on the actual floor. So they're getting like data feeds on workforce challenges or issues that gets fed up that you can start working on from a higher level, right?
Right. So weigh-in gets buy-in. So if we have a frontline worker who sees something when explaining a product, they can suggest content or best practices up into the platform, and then what we see it as is the L&D person, the HR person, the training person, the store manager, depending on your business, they become the air traffic controller, as opposed to being sort of the only person or part of just a small team developing training content. I mean, talk about the value when you get from the consumer telling you the types of things that maybe we need to be explaining better.
Right before we flip it to Paul here, the work that you guys have done with some retailers, what kind of ROI are these guys seeing based on the training?
Yeah, so I think there's three things that we can measure. We can clearly measure improvements in sales performance, and it depends on how the organization's mapping things a few different ways. But sales performance, one of the number one things people tell us is reduction in the time to onboard a new hire. So we have brands who, when you're hired, games get launched and your pre-learning checks all the boxes through games before I ever show up on day one. So, driving better sales, increasing the speed at which we can onboard a new hire from 0 to 60, and then reduction in turnover, because oftentimes training is something that happens at people. I keep hearing this term employee engagement everywhere. I'm sure everybody has seen that. It's a popular buzzword. We've seen stronger culture when employees are connected to other people. So you know what some of the best games we build are? Games on the team. So when I get hired at a store in downtown DC, I'm learning about my general manager and my other coworkers. So we talk about how do we engage workers to stay longer. It starts with them wanting to come to work, not just knowing what to do once they're there. Yeah.
Paul, I'm going to bring you in. Paul, you're no stranger to the footwear industry. And this panel coming right after a discussion on IP fits in really well to what you and your company are working on. So as we look at VI3, maybe tell us a little bit about what VI3 is and the technologies that you guys are working on for the industry.
Sure. So a lot of a lot of brands and executives, do you know the health of your market? Do you know how, if you have a counterfeiting issue or if you have a gray market issue, a lot of people don't have empirical data. So what we're able to do is to serialize product using QR codes and using crowdsourced consumer scans, you now get a vision of how healthy your market is. What you're seeing right now is gray market product. So is your product being distributed in the right channels? And what we are is we're behind the scenes, we're the data partner. We don't make QR codes, we don't make labels, we integrate with all the label partners, but we're the big data analytics engine behind the scenes. We were previously known as Valmark. We are rebranding to VI3. When you say Valmark in Europe or in Asia, we sound like a big retailer in Arkansas. So VI3 stands for Intelligence, Insights, and Innovation.
Valmark, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how the platform works. I know that you guys, you've presented at some of our other events at FTDC, and we know that you've done some work with Wolverine and tracking different things, and had a crazy story where your software was used to track a shipment that went to South America, and then one of the partners there somehow took a shipment and shipped it to Europe, so you could trace that in real time. So how does this work for brands who get involved in this? Are you guys going into factories and working with factories to implement the technology, and then how is it provided to the brand to have like an interface to see what's happening?
Yeah, good questions. So we work with the brands, and everything is based on a purchase order. So I spent last 15 years in brand protection, and a lot of times you'd be into a court case, and the counterfeiter would say, well, these brands just overproduce and it's out the back door. And you guys are all in the footwear industry. You know that everything is based on a purchase order that you send to the factories. And what we do is we integrate that purchase order data and we serialize it with label providers. And as product is coming through the manufacturing process, we're scanning it. So think of footwear, left shoe, right shoe, shoebox. We're tying 3 unique serial numbers together. And then we're tying the shoebox serial number into the case, and then the case onto the container. So you're starting to get supply chain visibility at the birth of the product. People talk about the blockchain. Well, this is the blockchain of the product. When we get into factories with brands, factories like this as well, because if you've been to factories in Asia, you know that there's not a very big level of automation. So now if you're a factory owner, you get to actually start seeing real-time work in process of your products going through your lines, whether you're a factory owner or a brand owner. So you can use it for supply chain visibility, anti-counterfeiting, gray market diversion, and then there's the consumer story. So consumers are starting to scan QR codes. If you go to Asia, you know that QR codes are prevalent. They're getting bigger in Europe, and we think that they're going to get really big in the US very soon. That as you scan the QR code, you're getting the brand story. You're getting what do consumers want? Know me, teach me, sell me, serve me. So the brand can engage with the consumer on the marketing side, and all the while you're crowdsourcing that data and saying, well, they're not even buying authentic product, because the counterfeiter is going to try to reverse engineer the system, and they're going to say, well, if I scan this brand's product, it goes to the website. So I'm going to make the counterfeit product go to that same website, but we're not going to get the serial number right. So what's going to happen is then you're going to start getting visibility into where the counterfeits are, and you're going to be able to use this intelligence to actually start rating factories to get product at the source.
So when you guys have started to use this at factory levels with brands, what kind of responses are you getting from the factories, from the brands? What kind of feedback? Is this easy to go into and talk to them about? Are they eager to implement this stuff?
Yeah, it's easy to implement. It's easy to roll out. I think the challenge with the brands is because this crosses over many different functions in a company. You're talking to legal on brand protection. You're talking to sales on diversion. You're talking to marketing. And you're talking to supply chain. It's really a C-suite discussion.
Right.
So the challenge is getting all the right people to agree. So maybe you'll start off with supply chain visibility because that's their biggest pain. But you need to make sure that others in the organization know how to leverage this technology as well.
Right. So they get the full value out of the product.
Yeah, correct.
So you guys are basically putting my side counterfeit business out of business, basically. Polk and Priest Counterfeit Shoes LLC, right? What's that? Oh, come on. So at this point, I'll add in our last panelist, Jose Suarez from Impactiva, our partners that focus on optimization and quality and increasing productivity at our factory base. What have you guys been up to on the technology side these days when you guys are going into factories and taking a look at all the changes that are happening with our production hubs and facilities?
Thanks, Andy. When I look back, 2.5 years ago, I spoke at a conference in New York, and I gave a metaphor. My old system, when you walk into the factories in our industry, unfortunately, I gave a metaphor of they sounded and looked as an engineer, as an industrial engineer, like my old cystic fibrosis lungs. And unfortunately, with very few exceptions, 2.5 years later, we're still in the same place. So with our factory process optimization, transformation, consulting business, we've been spending hundreds of hours after we finish all of our projects trying to figure out what is it that is making us successful and getting incredible improvements in productivity and right the first time quality and speeding up manufacturing. And what we've figured out is that we have to revert back to the oldest technology that we all know, which is human intelligence.
All right, so tell us about that a bit then.
So it's funny that Sam talks about it, and Diane mentioned it earlier today. Everybody talks about artificial intelligence and big data, and we believe, and we're building a platform to be able to use that. But first, in our industry and the manufacturing space, it's all about how do we transform our factories to be able to meet the demands of the pull versus push system. I mean, we've seen presentations this morning about the consumers designing our products, and it's all about pull versus push. And to be able to make that transformation on the manufacturing space, we believe that all the retailers and brands have to talk about, have to spend their time and resources not only on the front end, which we saw a lot about today, but also on the back end, which is manufacturing. And it comes to how do we transform and use the millions of minds that are underutilized in today's manufacturing. We have 8 or 9 million what we call artisans. It was funny to hear Diane use the same name for the Alan Edmond artisans, is how do we transform and engage them, as Sam just said, and win the hearts? Because if you all have walked through factories in Asia, you can see the product just moving from one position to another, and nobody is caring whether the quality is off or whether they're taking more time to produce it. And so how do we actively engage, motivate, and get the artisans, the millions of artisans, and there's like 50 million in the world of apparel, how do we get them to be engaged in producing better quality and meeting the demands of today's consumers?
So what's the secret sauce to doing that then? How do we at the factory level, like obviously, you know, Sam's talking more U.S. based in the Western world, but in, you know, in Asia and other cultures, how do we do that from your experience?
So the video that just played was a factory where we worked in for 4 months. It was an Adidas factory, and I don't know if you saw, but the smiles and happiness and engagement, and what the artisans or the line supervisors, and we have a technique called the Oreo technique, where we teach supervisors a 3-step process, how to speak and communicate with the artisans on the production line. So we tell them positive reinforcement, then corrective action, and then end with positive feedback. So it's a sandwich, an Oreo. So we teach all the supervisors, and then we tell them, we're going to give you homework, and we're going to be looking at you doing this 3 times every day for an entire week, so that we're coaching you on how to properly communicate with the artisans on the production line. At the end of the entire week, we had a meeting with all the supervisors, and we said, what did you learn? And one of them raises their hand and says, we thought they were the enemy. And that's our industry today. So it's all about activating and engaging the minds of the millions of artisans that work for us.
So you go down there and you do the training. What are the results that you guys are seeing with some of the brands you work with?
If you look at it, we in that factory that we just showed you, literally in 15 weeks, we got 25% improvement in productivity, 16% improvement in right the first time. When Colaris closed down its last factory in North America in 2003, their pairs per operator per hour was 2. In our industry today in Asia, if it's non-athletic brown shoes, it's only from 0.4, 0.5, maximum 0.8. Athletic, the Nikes, Adidas, New Balances are managing about 0.8 to 0.6 to 1.4. So we basically have the possibility, if we activate and engage the artisans and use their minds and their creativity like all the other industries have done. The auto industry did this in the United States during the 80s, the electronics industry, Foxconn and equivalents in the 90s, early 2000s. We believe that now it's the time to start transforming our industry, and it all starts with activating and engaging the artisans.
So how does someone out there who's looking at this and says, I would like to try this out and get somebody into my factory, do you suggest starting small with a few factories to test out this process, see the results, kind of test it out and deploy it out?
Well, first of all, we have another issue in the industry, which is our relationship with our factories is very transactional most of the time, with few exceptions. We believe that we have to turn this into a strategic partnership. Strategic partnership says, look, this is where you are today, and we're going to start measuring your performance, whether it's speed, flexibility, productivity, quality, on a quarterly basis, and we're all together going to set goals on a continuous improvement. The caveat to that is that if I, the factory owner, am going to improve my factory, what am I going to get in return besides lower cost? We have to be able to reach agreements on reserving capacity. That's what the Nikes and Adidas have been doing for decades. Our brown shoe, non-athletic industry is still not there. We still are very transactional. We're afraid to commit to capacity, especially when we're a retailer and we're buying direct. And this is the only way. I mean, this is how Nike and Adidas have gotten from when they were 15 years ago at 0.4 pairs per operator per hour, and now all their factories are at 0.9, 1, 1.2, 1.3. You got to give them the confidence that if they improve, you're going to stay with them so that they have the carrot to transform themselves. And finally, Andy, we're working on technology from all the lessons of 16 years. It's a 4-headed hydra. We're in beta mode now, starting in 2 weeks in India, Portugal, and China, where we're going to use all of our deep industry knowledge, education, as Sam said, and digital platform to be able to win the hearts and minds of the artisans in the industry. We feel that this is going to be revolutionary. We've only shown it to 9 of our clients, Caleres, Adidas, etc., and everybody's been super impressed with what we're coming up with. Now we just have to go out and deliver it and start deploying it.
Looking forward to seeing that as well. I'm going to open it up now to questions of the audience. Right out front, great. Yeah, just shout it out.
So Juan, I want to actually expand on what you're talking about. I agree. I think the world is changing. I think our industry is changing, and I think Joe talked about for being naive. I want to talk about a program that my company has initiated. We started about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and that is working with our artisans directly. And what we started to do is offer summer camps and child camps to the artisans that we work with. We don't want transactionary relationships anymore on any level, and that includes the factories that we're working with, and it also includes the retailers that we work with and our partnerships. But specifically with the factories that we work with, it's our turn to give back and to create this level of partnership. And when we talk about migratory workers, the best way that we found to give back is to allow these workers that really see their families 2 weeks out of the year. By opening these summer camps, we have now increased the time that these workers see their families by 40% annually.
Oh, that's cool.
It's really cool, right?
Yeah.
We started with one factory, and it's complicated. We're working with the Chinese government and the local government, and compliance teams from retailers. And it's so far outside of the box thinking that we literally found our first location by getting in a car and finding it.
That's great.
When we told our second factory that we're bringing them into this program, the families started to cry. These are ways that you can support your factory workers. And although it's a qualitative program, we are naive to think that there is not a quantitative return on this investment. It's our obligation, but frankly, there is a financial return on this investment. These are ways that we should be changing our industry, because if we continue to police production, we're going backwards and not forward.
Yeah, the days of policing are over, totally over, and we really have to engage the artisans on the factory floor. And the return, there should even be, like you just said, why not have, like you just said, a direct relationship between brand and retailer and the artisans, so that they, and this is the educational part that we'll be rolling out, is so that they understand, as we build an ecosystem for a retailer and brand, digital ecosystem, so that they understand that there's a brand and a retailer that appreciates them and is evaluating them and getting motivating, providing education so that they rise and get better as human beings, and ultimately to help the consumers, because that's what it's ultimately about.
Yeah.
How do you deliver more value?
Great point. I think there was a question in the back. Was there a question in the back? Did I see a hand raised? No? I'm blind. Other questions? Let's talk about, we're talking about some education, we're talking about platforms, technology, so we're talking about supply chain visibility, we're talking about new technologies, and I think you kind of teed us up. You already look 10 years into the future, and you're talking about some kind of mixed reality that people are going to be using. I mean, we saw some of that with the Google glasses that may not have taken off, but the idea will stick. Where do you guys see our industry and our workforce and our economy heading in the next couple of years? And then tie it back to your technology and how important that is to kind of integrate in where you fit in with where it's going to be.
I'll start. One of the things I start seeing is more connected products. People are starting to wear connected devices, connected products. So I see what we're doing is actually digitizing your product and connecting it to the consumer directly is sort of a start. And I think more and more brands are starting.
So like the IoT.
Yeah, the IoT is starting maybe more in scale to start rolling out.
Okay.
I was at a Young Presidents Organization disruption conference about 2 months ago, and an author of a book called Exponential Organization spoke, and he said it's the first time in our history that in any transformation, whether you went back to the Industrial Revolution, there was normally only one, maximum two industries that were disrupting existing businesses and business models. He says in today's world there's 12 of them, and all of them follow the Moore's law. So they're moving along and they're not impacting you very much, and suddenly, wham, they hit you. And when there's 12 of them, and you get hit in any industry by 3 or 4 at the same time, you get disrupted just like Blockbusters did, or many other companies that we know are out of business. And their feeling, or his feeling, was that this is going to happen more and more. And what's disconcerting is that you don't see it happening. Right. So you're asking the question, where are we going to be? And for example, with regard to the artisans, everybody's talking about robotics, and the Speed Factory, and what's the one in Under Armour is here in Baltimore. And what is that going to look like in 10 years? Everybody I ask says, well, we might be getting rid of 20, 30, 35% of the artisans getting rid of in terms of replacing them with robotics over the next 10 years. But it's scary to think that things could happen much faster. Yeah. And we could disrupt millions of lives. And like the ambassador said this morning, what are we going to do with all those millions of lives that today depend on, going to work and stitching and producing a garment or a shoe for us?
And I'll bring you in, Sam, because I think Ambassador Furman's comments where I think you said at Berkeley, they're telling students in 10 years you're going to be working in a job that has never been created. So obviously we look at colleges and universities to provide foundations of education, but then all of a sudden what you thought you were going into or thought you were being prepared for is disrupted, and you're in a completely different space. And talk about how, when you talk about your platform being able to speed up that skill gap really quickly. Are we going to see, is this the future of what we're going to look for in our workforce training efforts to bridge gap?
Yeah, I think that we know jobs are changing. We know they're changing faster than ever, and I think that we all know, and listen, we still hire a heck of a lot of young people right out of college, and we can tell you that getting an employee to be excited about coming to work knowing they have $20, $30, $40, $50,000 of college loan debt is tough. Yeah. The what's on people's back when they come into work, and I'm just picking on one population because other populations have different challenges that they're experiencing from their community when they come to work every day. I think there's a ton of technologies that are going to do interesting things around work. I think this is the theme. The chief learning officer role and the chief HR role are going to shrink. I think that they've been essentially responsible for the development of your largest line item on your balance sheet, and they're not necessarily incentivized by the performance they're tied to. That's sort of one thing which could be an explosive different conversation, but I would say that I think you're going to see a world where the frontline worker designs their work. They contribute to it, because if robots are going to come in and they're going to take our jobs, as I joke about, they're going to come in, they're going to take a lot of the transactional labor or certain types of work. It means that the jobs that are going to be available, that we're not even sure what those roles are going to have to be created super quickly. Who's going to build the job responsibility checklists and the duties and the onboarding checklists? It's not going to be the chief learning officer or the HR person. It's going to be your frontline labor in their middle manager roles. I think the thing that's most scary to me today when I talk to companies, I hear more and more the challenge is less about frontline as I think people start to look forward, and it's that middle manager tier. It's the barista that became the manager that's now responsible for other people. It's your retail associate that's now the store manager. So I think we're going to see technology come together to find a way. You can call it crowdsourcing, we can call it blockchain, but best practices are going to have to come bottom up and not just top down. And I think the tech that's going to win is going to ones that figure out how to do that seamlessly.
There you go. That's a great point. I'm going to leave you with the last word of the panel, my friend, mon ami. One thing that I'm fascinated with, and I'm always trying to wrap my head around, is when we talk about the workforce, we're also talking about technologies every day that are being developed that we never thought of. When we start to see 5G deployed, when we see 10 times the speed of our smartphones at basically less than 1% latency, meaning that we were talking about what this looks like, this new reality looks like, where people can use augmented reality and virtual reality from their smartphones at that point. When you look to the future and you see that, and you look at your platform and what you guys are doing, how much more innovative can you guys be, and how much more experience is that going to provide consumers as they look at shoes and shop for shoes?
Great question. I guess there are a number of things at stake, but typically with faster internet, we're working on ways to support much larger files, and typically when you're designing products with CAD software, very often it's very heavy data, which today is hard to make run through like the normal Sketchfab, but we're working on this new pipeline called Massive that is able to support files of unlimited size, and we automatically tile it, and we automatically generate level of detail, which means you'll be able to upload much higher resolution of files and much larger files, and still be able to share them and view them on the internet. And then the other aspect is on the VR and AR side, just going to be able to have better frame rate, less latency, and just better immersion in general, I guess.
Because when I think about it, I don't think, we talk about 5G and Donald Trump talked about 10G. He just jumped the whole shark on that one. But when we talk about like 5G, I don't think a lot of people are thinking about that revolutionary impact, because I think that means that you can start taking 3D models like you have and actually integrating them into media that like we never have been able to before. So you talked earlier about how you can storyboard something and insert these things in, but what if you could take that 3D model and insert it into an actual video, and start to play around and create your own content with things like that kind of gives consumers a whole different ballgame and a whole different world where they're designing shoes in their own individual environments. So it's almost this full creation thing and full environment that they're creating themselves. I mean, I think it's a pretty exciting time to be a part of. And it's fun to see you guys grow and what you guys are doing. It's fun to hear what you guys are all doing. And all the great stuff that you're doing for our industry and other industries, and just being thought leaders on what's coming down the pike and trying to build products and services that help us. So I want to thank you guys for joining us today. I hope that you guys, before you leave today, will grab these gentlemen and talk to them about their products and how you guys can work with them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
some really good insights, all different segments.
Yeah, I actually got to sit in on this panel. I'm
Yeah.
always usually running around
That's
every
right.
event
Doing all
that
the
we
real
have.
work.
Yeah. But I actually got to sit in, and it was very interesting just getting like a different perspective. I think the technology part is something that I wasn't as, I guess, knowledgeable about as
Yeah.
far as like, as much as I am about like the brands and what they're doing, because I kind of read about that all the
Right.
time. But the tech part, especially the gamification part, was like
Yep.
really interesting to me. So very great panel.
Yeah, I think there's some really cool things happening with 3D, with Sketchfab.
Yeah.
And as I said, I think everybody needs to, it's free to download the app and play around with 3D images. You could augment stuff in your living room.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Target doing this now. You've got, IKEA's been doing it for a while. You can actually, we actually did this at our house before we bought a chair from Target. I augmented
placed
and
it in
dropped
there, right?
next to my dining room table
Yeah.
to see if the wood would match.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty crazy, but that's where we're headed. And then also, with Sam with One Huddle, which I 100% believe in their idea, because it's meeting the market ahead of time. I think it's impactful training and retraining on a daily basis that we really need for a lot of our folks. So
That's a different way of thinking.
there were some interesting highlights, and of course from VI3 and Impactiva and all the good work that they've been doing for a lot of different brands for many years as well. So hope you got a lot out of it. As always, we welcome feedback on our shows, and I know we've been clipping in some of these, but again, these were just too good not to include and broaden out conversations, because honestly, this whole show started from going to trade shows, having conversations and then going, gosh, I really wish I could take this conversation, package it, and send it out so other people could get something out of it as well. So in essence, that's what Shoe and Show is broadcasting out these conversations so we share best practices and we strengthen our industry. So with that, it's Andy Polk on behalf of Jasmine and the whole team at Shoe In, including our hardworking producer Blake in the studio having to stitch all these things. Until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.